clinical social worker at the Child Mind Institute. We're a national nonprofit that supports children and families with gold standard mental health care, advice, and resources. That is all online and accessible to everyone. You can learn more about the resources we have available for families during the coronavirus crisis, including telehealth evaluations, treatment, and other resources by visiting childmind.org/coronavirus. Today, I'd like to talk to you about growth versus fixed mindset and answer your questions about this, as well as anything else you're wondering about. Post your questions in the feed, and we'll also post helpful links to resources on childmind.org, as well as details about our next Facebook Live. Remember that we're here every day at 10 a.m. and 4:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we look through your questions daily. So I'm going to dive right into the topic, growth versus fixed mindset. It's really something that I think is really important in my work since I work a lot with trauma and resilience. And so I love talking about this because I think it's applicable to any situation because it is about resilience. And so cultivating resilience and the growth and fixed mindsets can happen with and without structure. And we're really trying to figure that out right now, especially when we're trying to figure out our structure. What resilience is it's the capacity to, recover from difficulties, from toughness. And that's really the textbook definition. As mental health professionals, it's really about the process of adapting. And it's, in the face of adversity, in the face of trauma, tragedy, threats, it's really about, even in the sources of our own stress, how do we recover from that? This doesn't mean we're, going to be jolly and happy all the time, but we really want to figure out how we can sort of deal and cope with these things. And that's what we've been talking to you for the last couple of weeks about. So, of course, our beliefs can help us or hurt us. And since we're developing a new normal, even when things are opening up, whatever state you might be in or, whatever county, we all have different timelines, right? We have to really accept that things are not going to go exactly the same as they did before. And it won't be like that. So it's really about sculpting, like I said last week, if you were able to tune into that one, that Facebook Live, it was really about sculpting your new normal. We had a Facebook Live a couple weeks ago about CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy. And it's something that I work more so with, given that I work with trauma. And it's really about the connection between our thoughts, our feelings, and behaviors. But here in this sort of resilience piece and the fixed and growth mindsets that I want to talk about, I really want to focus on the connection between what you think and what you do, because that is going to really be a way for us to navigate this new normal that we're just putting together as we go. That's changing every day, every week, every month. Now going into May, what does that look like from when we were in March, when we were in the first week of April? All of those things, these are new and they're changing. So, we're thinking when there's a part of CBT that's about behavioral activation, and it's really for us to have behaviors or think about our behaviors and how they influence another, and our emotions as well, how they're connected that way. So if I do something positive, even though I'm having negative thoughts, it is likely that I might end up having positive thoughts, which will allow me to have another positive behavior. Same thing with thoughts. If you have a positive thought, hopefully that will lead to a more positive behavior and, more of a positive thought again, leading to another positive behavior. So just kind of those wavelengths of what can affect one thing versus the other. And this is a skill. I mean, I've talked a little bit about mindfulness in my daily tips, and I want you to know that this is not something that happens overnight. I have been practicing my own sort of mindfulness, I want to say, for a handful of years, and it is not even easy for me to just be consistent in sort of going through and coping, using my coping skills in the appropriate manners. So this is about a skill. And I think the real thing that I want to get, starting with growth mindset, is that you really believe that you have the capacity to grow. That's really what that is. It's not about, I do love people who, especially in my own life, and I try to be this person as well, who's very positive, and that you can go to them and they just have a smile on their face and they're having a great outlook about life. But that's not 24/7, right? This person has obviously gotten to a point where they're able to do that, and they're using their own sort of coping mechanisms and ways to do so. So, growth mindset is really about understanding your abilities and how they can be developed. And in this case, when we're in isolation, when we're not as socially connected physically, but we are socially connecting virtually, it's really understanding that the ability to adapt. And that's kind of what I want to talk about today. And I have some questions from that we collected that I would love to answer. And I'm going to sort of dive a little bit more into that. But before I do, I want to talk about fixed mindset because that's exactly how it sounds. It's, when you're thinking about the flip side of things from a growth mindset, someone who has a fixed mindset is really thinking like things are more permanent. It's the belief that you have the, sort of the intelligence or it's really like you either have it or you don't type of deal. And when it comes to abilities and talent, you're kind of just like, I'm either really good at this or I'm really bad, and there's no in between. For example, thinking about our children right now who maybe they're with distance learning, math. This isn't my thing. I can't do this. That's really fixed because your of course your abilities when you're learning, they change all of the time, but we have a certain mindset, and I really want us to focus on those differences in mindsets because that is going to do a lot for how or make a difference for how we behave. And when I talked a little bit last week about sculpting your new normal, it's really an acceptance piece to this that I hope we don't miss out on. I hope that we do really sort of take heart to that this is going to be not only is growth versus fixed mindset a skill, but it's a skill to be able to have the resilience and be able to adapt. And so that is I would say the core part of this, and enabling yourself to recognize when you have a fixed or growth mindset. And as a social worker, we have a saying that we really stand by in our work is you start where the client is. And that's where we're starting with every day. Start where you are. I mean, even with colleagues, I have to reevaluate. Well, yesterday I was gung ho and excited about this project, and now it's Tuesday and now I'm not so motivated. And that's going to be changing every day. And so my new normal has to be adapted to that. And it's about my mindset. But I'll go ahead and start by jumping into some questions. Please feel free to post in the chat any questions that you may have about growth and fixed mindsets. I'm here to help. And again, my name is Catherine Leach, and I'm a clinical social worker with the Child Mind Institute. So thanks for joining in. But the very first question is, my 11-year-old daughter gets very upset when our routine changes. Her rigidity has just, it's been challenging as time has gone on, and it's much harder. Any advice on how to help her be more flexible would be greatly appreciated. So, we've talked a lot about routines in some of our Facebook Lives, and you can find tons and tons of resources about how to set up your routine and your daily routine. I love these resources, but it's really hard for us to keep doing those things. It's really hard for us to be consistent in our routines. And so, yeah, your 11-year-old daughter, if she's having challenges with changes, I mean, this really, really unpredictable, sort of hard to adapt to change is going to have a toll on her. So, I mean, really, I think that establishing and having comfortability with talking about what the new routine is going to be, and if this is something that she likes and she can stay consistent with it, use that. If we have this, before we would have these, this is the time you go to school, this is the time that I get picked up and mom comes back home from work or anything like that. We had a schedule, we had a sort of routine. we need to sort of not mock that in our homes, but try to see how best we can do that. So I would start there. I think first, setting up a routine that she, definitely give her some guidance on what that routine can look like, but also give her some agency on how she would like her routine to look like. Because the more that she has input into this, the more likely she's able to keep consistent and not sort of have outbursts because this routine is really changing and it's hard to keep up with. Um, and so then, being flexible, like I said, is going to be something every day. You're going to be reassuring her that this is a temporary change and that this is going to be what it is for now. And when there are changes, we learn to adapt. And teaching your children about resilience, I will repeat this as many times as I have to, is resilience is not about optimism and positivity. But, there's definitely components of that in there, but it's about how do we recover? And so every time there is a change, how do we recover, especially if we're missing things from prior, for our prior life or, a prior circumstance, something like that. So I would definitely look at it from those lenses and trying to help her understand a little bit better about what happens when there are changes, because we're changing rapidly. I mean, even using the example of changing in your stages of life. I mean, she's a child now, and there are going to be changes right when she becomes an adult. I mean, we've all gone through that, and it's not the easiest of times, and you learn a lot. But that's what a change is meant for, and so hopefully that will sort of ease that up a little bit. So some of her hesitancy for flexibility. I will go on to the next question, which looks like, actually, we have a question here from the feed. Thank you so much, Catherine. It looks like Catherine is asking, we're struggling with our 7-year-old not being tired and not being able to switch off some days. We have physical activity during the day, a lot of fresh air, and as much routine as we can manage while working from home by bedtime. I need adult time as the 4-year-old is up first thing. It's not every day, but it's exhausting. Yeah, 7-year-old is going to have some energy, and that typical energy that was probably happening at school is now having to be managed at home. So, this is a really good question, Catherine. I think that physical activity during the day is really helpful. I think that your 7-year-old is really being able to take from that and hopefully release a lot from there. And then when you're getting home, I think really it's about finding some activities to keep the mind productive and some stimulating activities, because really that's what your 7-year-old is looking for is, what am I to be doing? I'm feeling like I want to be doing something, and that's where that energy is coming from. And you also have a 4-year-old. Recognizing that you don't have that necessary, energy is really important, because it'll show you what sort of capacity and how you're supposed to also manage your energy. So starting with the two things, and I definitely think this can be tied back to having sort of a growth versus fixed mindset in our new normal, is that we're going to have a difference in what that looks like for releasing energy. I think that we're, talking to your 7-year-old about, this is a good time for us to have as a family. We're getting some physical activity in there. This is great. And this is some wind down time. Being very concrete about that. This is the time where, mom and dad, we're able to wind down, as well as you. We all need this time. And it's going to be something that is probably repetitive, that you might have to say a couple times for it to sort of be sort of locked in. But I think this is pretty helpful when just thinking about some clients I had earlier this week, where we were talking about the differences between emotion and state of being. And so I'm thinking of a 7-year-old, and I'm thinking a lot of it is, especially with that wind down time, that language is, I'm bored, right? And so it's interesting because with the state of being versus an emotion is maybe we're feeling like, I am feeling sad about not being able to do the things that I used to do, which can translate into I'm bored. There's nothing to do here. Um, I think that it's really important for your 7-year old to understand, okay, these things that I used to do before for my physical activity, or these ways that I'm really energetic and I just want to do things and play. These are some other activities that I can do. So I'll dive into some of those activities. First, if you have any sort of, I would say, educational games that your child can play, there are tons of resources online for those, but also there's some great things that you can sort of print out. There's worksheets and things like that, really making them your child feel a little bit more stimulated. Things like puzzles make a difference. That sort of stimulates them in putting pieces together. Things that include I'm thinking of acknowledging shapes and numbers and things like that. That can also be educational as well as stimulating for your child to feel like they're doing something. So it could either be a sort of screen related, or it can be sort of more activity based. If I would say, and this will be my last point on this one, but for the adult time, if you are able to coordinate your schedules that really are sort of tailored towards you getting that adult time, not only for yourself, not only for the other parent, but also for your time together. So I would say that puzzles and things like that are great things for keeping the child when they're alone, or you're just sort of watching them and they're doing that project. Making sure that there are times where one parent is maybe focused on the child's energy, and then the other parent sort of takes over. In addition to, here's something that can keep our 7-year-old and 4-year-old stimulated while we have time. So I just wanted to make sure that was the last point on that, and that hopefully will help with things that are feeling pretty exhausting. I am going to pause right here because it looks like we might have another question. But again, if you are just now tuning in, my name is Catherine Liege, and I'm a clinical social worker at the Child Mind Institute. I'm working with the Student Success Program, so I love kiddos, and we're answering some questions today about growth and fixed mindsets. So we do have another question, and it's from Susie. Thank you so much, Susie, for tuning in. It says, we have another 7-year-old with high functioning autism and a lot of anger. Any tips? So this is a good question. I think with the resources that we may have talked about earlier with growth and fixed mindsets, I think this might be a little bit more, useful on your end, because here's a couple things that I'm thinking. With your 7-year-old and high functioning autism, there might be a lot of different factors that you're trying to manage with your child, as far as the social aspects of things, making sure they're feeling that they are connected with you, connected with if they have any siblings. So I think that, as far as tips that I would have here is you want to have some of those resources that can help with their anger, with trying to figure out what is the cause of this anger, what do they typically get angry about. I think this is where you would do some of that investigating. And it looks like you had another thing to say, Susie. His ABA had a change and now prevents her from coming over. So that could definitely be a source of some of that anger. Now, with that change and prevention of the ABA being able to come over, I can see how there might be a lot of feelings towards that, and talking to your 7-year-old about what that looks like and how they're feeling about that can help you with a change of space or change of pace, I guess. We talked about some routines earlier today, and this would be a good time for you to maybe restructure that routine for your child, especially since his ABA won't be able to come over anymore. Is there anything that can be done digitally? Is there any sort of resources that you have on deck that would be helpful for your child to still feel connected to his ABA, or just some skills that your ABA can share with you, and sort of continuing that, because I think that could also be a great opportunity for you both to have a really good relationship, and your child can feel supported by those things. So yeah, I think those are some great ways to start, some great questions to start with, really trying to figure out what that change in routine could look like, how it is that those skills and sort of helpful things from his ABA can sort of continue with you, and really trying to get down to helping and supporting that anchor, because of course with these changes, especially with high functioning autism, this can be really, really rough. And so validating and understanding, or at least even helping your child feel understood, can be valuable for that. Okay, I hope I was helpful for you, Susie. But we do have another question, and hopefully this can relate to some other questions. It says, my daughter is very stuck on before, as in, but before we could go see Nana whenever we wanted, but before we always went out for pancakes, and I'm trying to help her adjust to the new normal, but it really isn't working. How can I make her feel at peace with the present? This is great, and hopefully this can, like I said, can connect to some of those other questions before. And I said before, and I'm thinking about, as the child said, before we could go see, and I used this term earlier when I said, but before we were able to do this. This is really helpful. The growth and fixed mindset can be really helpful. It's about changing our mindset. But before this, before, the change in life, well, what about the now? What sort of language are we using about now? And I think, I got this question last week about, this can be scary to talk about a new normal. What does that even mean for a new normal? And what does that look like? What that looks like is you're adapting. What is the mindset? Well, but before we can see Nana wherever we wanted, well, here's how we see Nana now. Maybe we see her if we stop by and wave, outside of our cars. Maybe it is when we're seeing each other digitally on the iPad, on our, some sort of digital device, or that we're able to connect and still with Nana. But before we went out to see, or we went out and got pancakes. Right now, we're going to be, eating pancakes at home, and we're going to make those together, and this is how we can make that fun. Well, the adjustment period is really about a difference in mindsets. And so I wanted to make sure that when we're thinking about the abilities that we have, I can't do this digitally. I can't function with this being all online, or I can't function with this, me having to social distance with my friends or my family. That is really, really important for us to say, this is a mindset change about what we can do now versus, oh, but before. Okay. I am going to take the last question, and question is from Courtney. Thank you so much, Courtney. It says, I think my child might have slow executive functioning, or maybe slightly on the spectrum, but had only started exploring that very gently with his first grade teacher, or his grade 1 teacher, before this happened. How might I continue to explore whether this is correct and get him prepared and supported next year in school, so that we don't start behind? I really do appreciate these types of questions, especially when I talk to parents, and you just sort of having this awareness of your child's behaviors. I always love that, because that means you're paying attention, right? So with that, I would start with really your resources, talking to that first grade teacher about his sort of, and exploring that, continuing that conversation is what I'm trying to say. Another piece is a lot of this, and I say this lightly so that you don't sort of go into the rabbit hole of investigation and researching, but it's really good for you to sort of collect and see and get your own support system of what that looks like. If you have friends, if you have neighbors, if you have family that also might be experiencing this with their children, or if you know anyone else that has children with slow excuse me, executive functioning, or being slightly on the spectrum, or is on the spectrum, getting some tips and ideas. This is where I talked about I talked about this again in my last Facebook Live about having a resource sort of toolbox. What do I do when I, am having these ideas about my child's behavior? Child Mind Institute is here to help in those types of situations, getting those consultations, getting that feedback that you might need. You don't have to figure this out all on your own, and so hopefully that mindset and sort of starting there, I have, saying into yourself, I have the capability to learn more about what this means for my child and what can I do, and that will help you prepare for the next year as he, goes on to grade two. So, and I would start there and leaning on to your team of people that you know, or if that, finding your new team. Definitely look into our resources online, because this is a question that is not uncommon, especially when you're in the first sort of stages of figuring out these things. There's definitely some support there, and like I said, being kind to yourself and not overwhelming yourself with information and sort of, I have to make sure that I prepare my student right now today. You do have time. The school year is not exactly over quite yet. So just being sure that you're pacing yourself and sort of understanding what that looks like. And then as time goes on and you're able to get evaluations and more thorough information about what to do, hopefully it will be helpful that you took these steps beforehand. But all right, I want to thank everybody. Thank you again for joining me. I hope that this was helpful. Remember that we're here every day at 10 a.m. and 4:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we look through your questions daily. Check the post for the topic for our next Facebook Live, and the Child Mind Institute is here to help with any mental health and parenting needs during the coronavirus crisis. No matter where you are, we have resources to help. So you can look at our daily tips or get in consultation or our gold standard telehealth treatment. Go to childmind.org/coronavirus. I wish you safety and wellness. Thank you.